Hi everybody and welcome. Great to see you all. Lots of people I know, lots of people I'm just starting to get to know. Always a delight. I'll just tell you just a little bit about where this came from, how this all started. So I've been hearing so many people having so many passionate debates over the years about scaling agile. It seems to be, the controversial topic. If you want a LinkedIn post to take over the world and get millions of views, then make it about scaled agile. When earlier on this year, I came across Luca's work about actually some research into what really works and going beyond the frameworks. I was like, wow, I really want to know about that. Partly because it's fascinating, partly because I've known Luca for a few years and I know what a great guy he is. I've been on previous meetups he's led and they've been really inspiring. So I thought, fantastic, I want to be there. Add you next. I couldn't make it. I was doing something else. Somewhere, there's been like 3 or 4 times Luca's done this kind of thing. I haven't been able to make any of them. So it's like, I know, I'll invite him to do one at a time I can make. So this is, thank you for all coming. This is indulging, my indulgence, yeah. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Luca's got to say this evening, very specifically about going beyond scaled frameworks and what really works. So without further ado, over to you, Luca.
Thank you. And quick instructions and today's agenda. Can you all see the slides well? So a few instructions starting with the browser. I will share a couple of links during the presentation and you will need to look into those links. Today's meetup will be divided in 2 parts. This is the first part, a frontal presentation, and then the second part will be question, answers, and discussions. We are here in this quick intro. I will present just a few common examples of problems that people can face when scaling agile, just to connect us and our memory to the topic. And then I will introduce the idea of using principles to rescue the situation. And I will provide a quick summary of these principles. The work that I'm presenting is a work that consolidates many ideas from the whole Lean and Agile community, and there are many contributors. The work has been done in 2020 by Giovanni Asproni and myself. Let me introduce myself quickly. I'm working with Lean and Agile since the very beginning of the Agile movement, so it's almost 20 years. Starting from the beginning means that I've been quite lucky and privileged in experiencing genuine and good Agile firsthand. I work in a lot of different organizations that adopted Lean and Agile in software development, in a multiple teams setting, in multi-product settings, but also beyond the software development and in the old organization. And that's the type of experience and point of view that I'm bringing here today and with this work. As I said before, get your browser ready because Roy is sharing with you right now in the chat the link to Slido. Slido is a tool for you to ask questions, comments, your disagreement and challenges to the topic that I'm going to introduce during this frontal presentation, so that later on we can discuss. So please open the link and start asking your questions, and also voting the questions that you find interesting. If you had a nickname when you post the questions, we can engage you directly during the answer. As promised, now I'm going to give a quick overview, 3 examples of common problems when adopting Agile at scale, when trying to achieve agility at scale, and again, if you want to go to the chat and share the problems that you faced when try to scale agile, please do it and share your problems on the chat. Let's start with an Italian commercial, a famous one.
Ma cosa fa con quell'arnese? Ostacola il traffico.
Devo dipingere una parete grande, ci vuole il pennello grande.
Non ci vuole un pennello grande, ma un grande pennello.
This is one of the common problems when scaling agile. Organizations that think that they are big, and so they want something big, a very big framework to solve their problem. What else? Well, another common problems nowadays is the lack of focus on technical agility. We all know that business agility is our end goal when we want to adopt agile at scale. But one of the two pillars of business agility is technical agility. And without that, we cannot be agile. Being agile at team level, being agile at organization level is not enough if your technology cannot move as fast as the rest of the organization. And I don't know if you had a look at the link that I shared with you about how large organizations achieved agility at scale successfully. You will notice that for all those organizations, technical agility has been absolutely fundamental. The third common problem when scaling is related to agile frameworks. Every framework that you adopt has some kind of context, some kind of conditions where these frameworks work best. But it doesn't mean that the context for that framework is exactly the same context that your company is currently in. And what's more, the bigger the framework it is, the smaller the context where it works becomes. And so you end up very often in a situation where you put a lot of effort adopting one framework, but then there is a huge gap between your organization context and the framework context. And when I say the biggest the framework, the biggest the gap, I refer to those two elephants in the field of scaling framework that we know. One is disciplined agile and the other is safe. So, okay, those are common problems. I hope you shared yours in the chat. Let's start to think about the solutions and the work that Giovanni Asproni and myself did during 2020. And the idea is that when there are many frameworks, we know that there are few principles. And those, the men and the women that grasp those principles can successfully select their own methods. What's more, when you approach agility at scale using frameworks, you can also do what is right for your organization, your specific and unique context and circumstances. So if you're starting from scratch to achieve agility at scale in your organization, my suggestion would be to adopt an approach that is based and is driven by principles. Instead, if you have already started scaling agile in your organization using an agile framework, you can still use these principles that I'm going to present to you in order to re-energize your adoption and to direct the initiative where the effort have more chances to have the biggest impact. Okay, now let's start to get a quick overview of the principles. And here, Roy is sharing with you the second link that you need to look into. He's sharing with you the second link in the in the Zoom chat. So open the link now. You have the QR code, and I will ask you, you will need this page during the presentation, because I'm giving you a very quick and high-level overview of the key concept. But then if you look at the top of the page, you will find a short list of those 9 principles that I'm talking about. And then in the middle of the page, if you are here, if you are there, in the middle of the page, you will see a Google Doc. The Google Doc provides a longer description for each one of the principles. So if you like some of the principles that I'm talking to, you can immediately look at the Google Doc and look into the details. And that will help you to ask questions, to share your comments, maybe to suggest improvement, or even to disagree and challenge those principles. Finally, at the bottom of the page, if you are still browsing on that page and you look at the bottom, you will find 2 things that I think are very interesting. The link that Roy already shared before with the study of many big companies from Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and many other companies, and a description of what they did to achieve agility at scale. And I encourage you to compare what they did with what your company is doing now. And then you will also find another things that can be extremely interesting, and it is an introduction to complexity, because there are 3 legs in modern way of working. One is lean, the other is agile, and the third is complexity. And you will see that some of those principles that I'm going to present are inspired by complexity. So when you look at if you're looking at the page and at the principle, you will see that they are divided in 2 parts. Part 1 of the
Luca,
yes, please.
Is it possible to have a question in the middle? You said that if we were to start with something scaled, you would go with principles.
Yes.
What's the other turn? I just need a quick, like, what else? I mean, how not to start with a principle?
Well, many organizations start with the scaled framework. Start with looking at roles, looking at processes, looking at tools, and looking at recipes defined by scaled framework. So the alternative instead is looking first at the principles, and that's the key idea that I'm pushing now. Park for a second all the scaled framework and focus on the principles. Does this make sense?
Yes, I thought, I was like, okay, like principles, and what's the bigger level? Like, what's after principles? I totally get what you mean. So thank you for putting that into the direction. So yeah. Lean, agile, complexity. You were saying a lot of the things are into complexity, and I'm listening. Thank you.
Yeah. Now I will give a quick overview of the principle, and maybe later, if you want, you can add some question on Slido about what's next. But I will try to give you some hint on that too. So the first 4 principles in part 1 are really about testing the need for scaling. Many organizations start with the idea of scaling, but they do not really need to scale. The other thing about the part 1, the first 4 principles, is that after you test the need for scaling, even if you still need to go ahead and scale, those principles will help you to create the initial condition so that you start scaling on the right foot. So here are the first idea from principle number 1. The idea that when you scale, things become more difficult. And most of the time, the need for scaling is a symptom of other problems. So let's look exactly into that. What are the common problems? Here you see on the two bubbles on the left, some of the problems are related with the dependencies at product level. Sometimes some product have a feature bloat, completely unrelated features pushed into one product, where we could create a different product or put those features elsewhere. Sometimes for marketing and sales reason, we bunch together different products. We bunch them together even from a technical point of view, again, creating dependencies between the products. Then we have technical dependencies, accidental dependencies that are there because there is technical debt or suboptimal technical decisions. And finally, sometimes we have external experts and external teams that instead of working with us, they are outside there and we need to reach them out, creating even more dependencies. But what is the problem with dependencies? More dependencies in the end means more people and more team getting involved. Every time that you have to create a feature, or maybe you have a delivery initiative, you end up having to deal and to ask things to more people and more teams. Sometimes those teams have a different manager. So not only you have to talk with more people, you have to negotiate with other managers the priorities of their backlog. And only when all the priorities are aligned, only when all the stars are aligned, you have the hope that you can finally release that feature. But even if that's not the case, having more people and more team involved means that the cost of communication goes up extremely quickly. The cost of communication and coordination grow exponentially. When teams are 1, 2, 3, it's still manageable. But when you have 3 or more teams involved in the development of one feature or on a big delivery initiative, you start to feel the additional cost of communication, to the point that sometimes that communication and coordination become ineffective. And many companies with the traditional mindset or even some of the scaled framework react to that, adding more people to deal with the dependencies and the coordination, often with the traditional project management or a PMO style. So you see how more dependencies in the end involve more people that grow the communication cost exponentially. Because of that, it's easier to make suboptimal decisions, and this again create more dependencies. So you have this loop of doom. When organizations start to remove unnecessary dependencies, invest strongly in technical excellence to remove technical dependencies, create autonomous team with all the skills and ability required, and avoid product level dependencies, what you get is that you have far less dependencies and far less people and team involved. This is not something that is idealistic. Because of my job, sometimes I have to do due diligence, and sometimes I manage to work with the different companies working exactly in the same market, working exactly on the same type of product and the same size of market, where one company had 40, 50 people and the other company have 400 people working on the same product, serving the same market, dealing with the same type of challenges. It's just that one got into that vicious circle of adding more people and the other did not. I saw sometimes a small team of 5, 7 people doing the same work of an organization that have 70, 70 people working on the same thing. So this is not theoretical. I'm talking about a big thing. And when you do this, you may realize I do not need scaling anymore. I just have extra capacity that I can use elsewhere. But if after that you clean up your stuff, you reduce the dependencies, you streamlined your way of working, then part 2 of the principles, so 5 principles from number 5 to number 9, point you toward a direction where you can move to scale successfully and sustainably. The principle from number 5 to number 9 use an empirical approach. So instead of giving you recipes, they encourage you to use an empirical approach. It's like if you are doing research and development continuously on how to develop your product on your own way of working. Let's jump into the details and let's look at principle number 5. Principle number 5 is the most important, and realize that people is the most important and adaptable element of an organization. More than that, the more complex is the product that you are working on, the more essential is the role of people in your organization. So if you want to scale in a way that is successful and sustainable, you have to start to focus on scaling effective collaboration and coordination. If you look at the scaled framework, you will notice that scaled framework tended to focus on tangible elements, role, structure, processes. But in relation to the success of your initiative, those elements are useful but are secondary. Collaboration comes first. Collaboration and the relationship and the interrelationship of the people inside the organization, those that make the organization work and move on every day, that's the essential element, invisible, intangible, but essential. Let me tell you something. I don't want to seem fluffy, hugging trees and be happy. Well, that's very good to be happy, and also hugging trees is something that I strongly suggest you. I'm also talking about something equally tangible. I'm talking about cross-team collaboration and coordination, removing the obstacles to that collaboration, removing and relaxing dependencies, visualizing the need for collaboration, coaching and helping people across teams to collaborate together. Also, the approach to facilitate this collaboration is very different from the approach suggested by the scaled framework. You will notice that all the scaled framework provide a standard recipe for cross-team collaboration to be adopted by everyone and every team in the organization in exactly the same way. Complexity science, complex adaptive systems, and the related theory tell us that the collaboration is fundamental, and the way to deal with it is helping people every time that you have a feature that requires this collaboration, help the two teams, the people involved, to experiment and find their way to collaborate and coordinate in a way that works well for them. So yes, you can tell them, you can provide them examples and all the options that they can use to collaborate across team, but then you have to encourage them to experiment and to find what works from them. Eliminate the bottleneck, amplifying what works, and then sharing internally in the organization ideas and patterns that worked well in every occasion, letting people choose. The next principle is principle number 6, and that's important. Don't scale it until you nail it. Until you have something that is working well in the small, there is nothing to scale. The idea that you can create a complex system, creating a big system from the beginning, doesn't work, has been proven again and again. Every complex system that works starts small and then is grown gradually. Many organizations, again, from the article that I pointed to you before, many organizations that scaled agile started at team level initially, making things work at team level with mainly a bottom-up drive with the support of the leadership. And then when things started to work together in the small at team level, they scaled and increased their initiative, and then they added also a leadership top-down drive, but this later. So how do you grow when things work? And this is where principles 7 and 9 come handy. If you look at the Google Doc for principle 7, you will find a list of principles inspired by complexity thinking. So the idea, as I mentioned before, is the empirical approach, experimenting, learning, adapting, and evolving, guided by lean principle and by principle of complex adaptive system, specifically human complex adaptive system, and indicators, qualitative and quantitative indicators, metrics and that are chosen by those doing the work and that they are used by those doing the work, because they need those indicators to see where they need to steer left, right, push the gas or push the brake. So it's up to them to choose that. It is perfectly okay to use a knowledge base, a collection, an open set of patterns and practices from a lot of different frameworks. And this is closing my high-level presentation. We are quickly moving into answering the questions and having conversation in Slido. So if you haven't done yet, ask your question in Slido, vote your questions. I'm quickly closing, pointing out to this book that I'm writing, Living Complexity. As I mentioned, one of the 3 legs, complexity, together with lean and agile, and my contacts. Roy, I think to remember you want to take it from here.
I'm very happy to take it from here, Luca. I think we should wait for someone other than me to put some questions on Slido before we start answering them, though. So, yeah, please, if anyone's struggling with Slido, do shout out. I've just put the link into the chat, and feel free to put your questions in there.